2018. Last topic written in the notes. There's another one. Hamas attacked Israel on 50th anniversary week of Yom Kippur War from Gaza Strip. About 5,000 rockets were launched in the morning. Something like in 20 minutes? 5,000 rockets. That's insane. Something like 300 to 700 Israeli civilians are dead because of this attack in southern part of Israel. Hostages taken. This is Gaza Strip. This is where Israel is. I'm just pointing out through hand gestures. Probably will include map. If not, there's this tiny Gaza Strip. There's Israel, and on the right of Israel, or east of Israel, I guess you can say, there's West Bank. On the east of Israel. Many hostages were taken to Gaza. Many women were abused, and on camera, many civilians are. One of the footages that has gone viral is Gaza's soldiers or terrorists. They were parading naked a dead body of a woman. Absolute barbarism, if you think about it. Even if you support Palestinian cause, this is barbarism. This is absolute barbarism. So what happened? Clearly, there was intelligence failure. Air quotes failure. If you have a slightest idea of how military logistics work, or logistics in general, you know that they were watching these people bringing rockets from other parts of the world to the Gaza Strip. Same intelligence agency, Mossad, they know everything about everything. They are considered to be one of the best in the world, one of the most ruthless in the world. And all this talk of mass surveillance and Pegasus spyware, they most likely knew what was coming. And I don't know for sure because I don't work for Mossad. Okay? But they most likely knew about this upcoming attack. Because, like I said, most ruthless, one of the best intelligence agencies in the world, and considering the threat that Israel has from terrorists, they have to have a lot of surveillance cameras in the Gaza Strip. A lot of satellites pointed towards Gaza Strip, or at least the way Arabs call it, Gaza Strip, I think it's called. They don't call it strip, but Gaza, I think they call it. There were a lot of surveillance activities going on, and somehow they didn't know that they were bringing in weapons. Somehow. There are theories about this. One is politicization of intelligence agency. Because of Netanyahu versus the Supreme Court and all the protests that were going on, there are allegations that the Mossad is against Netanyahu and they were in favor of the Supreme Court, and they allowed this failure. They allowed this attack to damage Netanyahu's credibility as a strong leader. Or it might be a crisis of opportunity exploitation for territorial gains in the Gaza Strip. If you look at the map of Israel, in 1940s, in 1960s, 70s, 90s, 2000s. Border of Israel and Palestine has changed, and Israel has been gaining a lot of territory. So maybe this is just just a crisis that they would exploit to increase their territories. Maybe. There are also rumors that Iran or Qatar or Turkey funded Hamas to attack Israel at the time when Israelis and Saudi Arabia were close to a peace deal. Now Saudi Arabia has to stand with Palestinians because what Israel is about to do to Gaza Strip. They'll have no choice. Either that or they face the wrath or the Saudi establishment faces the wrath of its own population. So maybe they were trying to sabotage this. There's that angle. Hamas was in contact with Hezbollah, which is terrorist organization sponsored by Iran that's operating in Lebanon. Lebanon is to the north of Israel. So maybe they were the ones who behind this. Maybe it was Qatar or Turkey. There are a lot of countries that do not want a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Also, let me read this from Bard. There's a theory that Hamas was founded by Israel, and the theory is apparently rubbish. But some scholars argue that Israel played a role in the rise of Hamas, either intentionally or unintentionally. This is from Bard, Google Bard. Some scholars argue that Israel intentionally supported Hamas in 1980s as a way to weaken the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO), which was seen as more secular and nationalist movement. Hamas was seen as more Islamist and religious movement, and Israel believed that it would be less likely to threaten its existence. Calling it apartheid and whatnot. A secular state will call Israel apartheid. A lot of leftists do, and maybe that's why they supported Hamas, or rise of Hamas. Unintentionally. Other scholars argue that Israel's policies in Palestinian territories indirectly contributed to the rise of Hamas. For example, Israel's occupation of West Bank and Gaza Strip, its economic blockade of Gaza, and its use of violence against Palestinians have all been cited as factors that have alienated the Palestinian people and made them more likely to support Hamas. Evidence. There is some evidence to support both of these arguments. For example, in 1998, Yossi Olmert, a former Israeli mayor of Jerusalem, said that Israel had created Hamas in order to split the Palestinian movement. However, there is also evidence that Israel was wary of Hamas from beginning. For example, in 1989, the Israel military raided a Hamas mosque and arrested several of its leaders. Conclusion. It is difficult to say definitively whether Israel played a role in the rise of Hamas, either intentionally or unintentionally. However, it is clear that Israel's policies in Palestinian territories have had a significant impact on the development of Hamas. It is also important to note that Hamas is a complex and multifaceted organization, and its origins are the subject of much debate. Hamas has its roots in Palestinian society, and it is likely that it would have emerged even if Israel had not played a role in its rise. Whether Israel supported or founded Hamas, it's clear that Hamas was later subverted by Saudis and Iranians and anyone who was funding terrorist groups in 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and also 80s, 90s, 2000s, and early 2010s. It's clear a lot of countries have supported a lot of terrorist organizations. That is the truth. One of the most famous examples of this is United States supporting Al Qaeda against the Soviet Union in 1980s. What is terrorism, or what is terrorist organization? It is, I guess you can say, asymmetrical form of warfare, just like unconventional and asymmetrical form of warfare. When a side with lower power attacks a side with higher power, military power, geopolitical power, economic power, because they know the weaker power knows that it cannot defeat the more powerful state in a traditional war. But thing about terrorism is that terrorists are snakes. You cannot just expect to keep a snake in your backyard and expect it to not bite you, right? So that's what United States did. They kept snakes, Al Qaeda, against Soviet Union. Later on, Al Qaeda beat United States with 9/11 attacks. That's what Pakistan did. All these terrorist movements that it supported or founded or created from American money against Afghanistan and also against India in Kashmir and all over India. All the Lashkar-e-Taiba, Indian Mujahideen, all that. And of course, eventually, those terrorist organizations have beaten Pakistan. Pakistan has weak security. All the money that was coming from US to Pakistan, they wasted it on terrorism instead of its own development. Now its population is suffering from high food prices. One Pakistani rupee is close to what? One US dollar is close to 300 Pakistani rupees. There's high levels of inflation in Pakistan. And guess what? Even Canadians, they have kept snakes with Khalistani terrorists, and they're about to be beaten eventually by Khalistani terrorists, Canada. And if Israel did nurture Hamas to weaken Palestinian Liberation Authority, to weaken the Palestine movement, well, they're biting back Israel. And if they didn't, well, whoever is funding them and supporting them will eventually get bitten by all the other terrorist organizations. This is my theory. I wonder if this is a start of horizontal escalation by anti-West coalition. What do I mean by this? We all know United States and NATO in general is low on ammunitions and also some type of arms. It's low on stockpiles because they've sent all of it to Ukraine, and Ukraine is failing against Russia, even with all the NATO equipment and all the arms and ammunitions provided by NATO. Ukraine has failed against Russia. Ukrainian counteroffensive failed. And now, when United States has low arms and ammunition stockpiles and it has low energy because they release strategic petroleum reserves and they're running low on energy. If it's low on energy, if it's low on arms and ammunitions, it cannot support all of its allies. So you can expect, if this is the start of horizontal escalation, you can expect Israel-Iran war. You can expect North Korea-South Korea war. You can expect China versus Taiwan and Japan. you can expect all these wars coming up immediately, not 5-10 years down the road when United States has replenished its arms and ammunitions, but in the near future, this year or next year, you can expect a lot of wars started by the enemies of United States against the allies of United States. That means United States has to choose which party it can protect. If it decides to protect all of them, it cannot. It just cannot. And remember, even South Korea sent a lot of its arms and ammunitions, mostly ammunitions, to Ukraine, and North Korea is sending it to Russia. Maybe that won't happen. Maybe there won't be a war between North and South Korea in the immediate future. But if America's enemies have a chance to strike at America as a superpower, it is now, when American energy and arms and ammunitions are low. So that's my theory. This might escalate into Iran-Israel war. This might you might expect China, Taiwan, North Korea, South Korea war. You might expect a lot of conflicts against allies of United States by enemies of United States. That's my theory. That this is the start of horizontal escalation. What should be the solution? First and foremost, Iran-Saudi Arabia peace deal, Iran-Israel peace deal, and total complete neutralization of Hamas. Remember, Hamas is split between Saudi faction and Iranian faction, and Saudi faction is almost neutralized, but Iranian faction is not neutralized, and that Iranian faction of Hamas attacked Israel from Gaza Strip. So Iran-Israel peace deal needs to occur for total neutralization of Hamas. Iran-Saudi Arabia peace deal needs to occur for total neutralization of Hamas. Qatar, Turkey needs to be dealt with by United States. They have their own goals, Qatar and Turkey. They need to be dealt with, because Saudis and UAE are ready to move on to better future, to diversify their economies from oil and from terrorism. They want to increase tourism, decrease terrorism, increase tourism. They want to become a logistics hub in India, Middle East, Europe corridor. They want to diversify their economies. But Qatar not so much, and Turkey wants to expand its geopolitical influence. In a softer way, it wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire. Instead of just one empire, one caliphate annexing, kind of like NATO and EU type solution with all of its, that's what Turkey wants, with all of its former Ottoman Empire areas. Qatar and Turkey need to be neutralized. Solution number 2. After solution 1 is implemented, solution 2 also needs to be implemented. Or maybe side by side, solution 1 and solution 2 need to be implemented. So the solution 1 was Israel-Saudi Arabia and Israel-Iran peace deal. The second solution is clear borders for Israel and Palestine. Palestine needs to accept that Israel will exist. At this point, it's a gone cause. And also, Israel needs to accept clear boundaries. Because if you look at the map, like I said before, if you look at the map, Israel's borders have been increasing from 1940s to 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. And maybe it will expand further into the Gaza Strip now. Maybe. There needs to be clear border for Israel and for Palestine. And also, Jerusalem needs to be Vaticaned. And that is, it should be turned into an autonomous religious city-state, just like Vatican is. Because Jerusalem is a holy site, not just for Jewish people, but also for Christians and also for Muslims. I think Al-Aqsa Mosque, I think it's called. Apologies to my Muslim brothers if I got it wrong. I think it's called Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's the third most important mosque or the holy mosque after Makkah and Medina for Muslims. So Jerusalem needs to be Vaticaned, turned into autonomous religious city-state. Otherwise, this conflict will continue. The Middle East will be unstable. There are a lot of people who don't want a stable and prosperous Middle East. I want stable and prosperous Middle East. A lot of Indians and a lot of Chinese, by the way, want a stable and prosperous Middle East because, or anyone, basically anyone who imports oil and is dependent for oil and natural gas on Middle East wants stable Middle East. Some countries do not want it. Some Muslim countries, some non-Muslim countries don't want a stable Middle East. But most of the world, including Middle East, wants a stable Middle East. So that's that. End of my notes.